what we're looking at is we're looking at this process of them contacting an entity which named itself AI. Like Aiwass begins with AI. I mean, come on, it's right there, right? So Aiwass, which the narrative again on this is that Tesla writes in his own journals that he was visited for sure by Venusians and that they gave him that knowledge about the Tesla. And because of his position with JP Morgan and the rest of them and those who were making the laws, that they used him as a direct liaison to go and explain a different type of technology to the president, United States, et cetera. This is an old thing that, this is what started the UFO phenomenon. This was started Roswell, just this core truth. And then from there, they spun that whole generation out on now. They just waiting on Ashtar or some crazy shit, right? So the original part of that was just that the president at that time made a deal with Aiwass versus making a deal with the Venusians. Now I don't know which one would have been better or worse. I just know that we're in the reality where the weapon they gave them was one waff. One waff is a nuclear weapon pulled from the Vimana Shastras or the Bhagavad Gita. That's why Oppenheimer is quoting, "Now I've become death, the destroyer of the worlds." When he figures out the sequence to allow the implosion, because implosion is when, you know, as a being and meditating, when you implode, you quirk and you go into other realities. So they reverse engineered that and they created explosion at the magnitude of splitting an atom. Right. So all of that knowledge is what the knowledge was that was being deciphered. Now, when we think about when you're deciphering something, it means that you don't know. And that's what I believe that we've been dealing with for years and why we haven't seen like a big, huge opening of dealing with these type of entities is because they've just been in the learning process of trying to figure out how everything works. Just like we're kind of in this learning process trying to figure out how everything works. Ironically. And at the end of the day, what we've come to discover is that we're actually inside of something where something else is already monitoring everything that's going on. And that's why, you know, I always say then that only one can then consult with their ancestors in attends to how clear are you with everything going on around you. That's why, to be honest, I'm not saying that this is my specific purpose, but I've learned when you help people, you get help. So if you give knowledge that's clean and on point, and you know you really go in, or you bring elements of inch and power, and you bring value, basically is what they call it now. You never know what that's really doing in the whole thing, because we are really all connected. If somebody wants to argue with me that we're not all connected, like just on the simplest concept of math, how eventually we would get to your great-grandmother, great-great-grandmother, grandmother, great-great-grandmother, grandmother. And it would just keep going like this until eventually it would hit something where every single person was inside of that. And that's like the most common sense. So because of that, that also means that's why I go by the maxim all is self. Because I feel like our journey will continue here until we discover that. And it's like, so all is self, and you'll be here until however long it takes you to realize that. And then I realized that the bad things that were going on in the reality, I had to look at the miniaturized versions of those bad things that were going on in myself. Like, you know, being jealous at times or greedy at times, and then stepping that up 10x, 20x to kind of get a look at uncle. You see what I mean? And see how they were viewing the whole thing and the experience and the things that can be pursued during those times. And so all that what I would be doing is to just be collecting myself. Then there would be this stage, and I believe we all reached this stage where it's literally like the next opening to your next level of existence. And it's like literally a test. It's like, okay, well, what are you going to do with all of this? Are you going to abuse people with it? Are you going to manipulate people with it? And I believe that this test came to all these people that you're seeing inside these societies in some way, shape, or form, because they are all cards, right? Like they all they're carrying a certain energy, and then it's like they keep coming in as that card, and then they're getting played. And it's like it seems like when that keeps happening over and over, eventually you would kind of snap out of it. Like that's what deja vu is. You keep getting played, and then the moment of the play will be occurring, and you'll You'll smell something, feel something. It'll feel like your grandma's house or something like that. And you won't be able to relate it to something. And you'll be like, and that's it. And at that moment, what happens is that you're loading in. and that's what, when you're expanding your consciousness, it continues a series of loading in to those moments where you're actually still able to tap into the energy and the vibration of what you really are. So in conclusion, so when they brought Aiwass in, Aiwass could only tell them how to get the knowledge. It could not tell them the knowledge. And so when they started doing the experimentations, they started walking through the brain and the mind. That was MK Ultra. That was the Holocaust. They started working through the brains and the minds of the genetics of the planetary system, first experimenting on themselves. And then they realized that in the conclusion that they needed to deploy this, but not in the narrative that they were the winners. They needed to deploy this in a narrative that they're the losers. And this is why there's certain things that always happens in movies. Like, one, bring them to me, but don't kill them. And it's like, well, wait a minute, you're the bad guy. The whole goal is to kill all these motherfuckers. And you want, I don't get it. You see what I mean? But there's certain slips in the story that they include every movie. Like when an actor or actress is being initiated, there will always be a helicopter or a 8-pointed star and an umbrella. There will be either a tesseract, like Buddy just got initiated that did the Andor. There's a tesseract he walks through in the beginning. Next scene, a rear Joker runs by completely outside of the scene. So there are call tags and clues, but who are these call tags and clues for? They're not just for 75-year-old white men sitting around on their last breath. That's not what they're for. Those are the what they call the master race that I was telling you that they created, the God Dog. It's for something else that is watching the whole spectrum. Like, this is not the only one. And for me, I just stopped paying attention to that after a while. It's like, okay, well, it's watching. I can also see you. But what am I doing in this? Who am I? And I started realizing, I kid you not, that I created this. And I believe that every single person needs to power up to that level, like take the responsibility. It's like a man that now needs to accept that these are his kids. You see what I mean? And also in other narratives, a woman that finally needs to discipline her child. You know, all the different power lessons that are also learned in this space. I just know that we're upgrading the thing to another level by taking off this wool. Like I said, this, because this being is very weak, first of all. So Aiwass was a deteriorating force, as all phantoms are. They need the energy of the things that are around them in order to power themselves. And then they're able to physically manifest for a moment before they fade back into their ghostly state. And that's also those pictures that you were showing. I thought, you know, when you were showing those pictures about the electromagnetic the reanimator, as it's called, where, you know, you use electromagnetic field as a gateway to contact what you think is your lost loved one, but it's just gen technology. This is why they always talked about, hey, you know in necromancy, if the person that is playing like they're the dead family member that you lost is really them, you have to actually be in that plane to really see. So it's just like, you know, so this technology in conclusion was the root, this kind of dark technology, if you may, was the root of when it finally came to these masters. They call them the green gloves. This is why the Beatles, Buddy, Steve Jobs, who's, you know, in the island of Neverland, they call it like basically when you're ranked up to where you physically, quote unquote, die in the world, but you go into this other space. They all had the same master and the same guru. And this is because what I figured out what was going on is that all these major stars and actors, if you may, they had like this group of guys that were around them. I called them the Hollywood crew, or the California crew. And a lot of these guys are operatives. They're trained in mental intelligence, psyops, this kind of thing, but some of them have some type of spiritual power. And the spiritual power is simple. It's the same thing that York was doing inside of his community. They use dwarves. If you read some of the other books, they talk about and explain how, like, the dwarves, which are not actually in this realm, they actually can disappear. They have like this thing that's like bling and they just disappear. That most of the magic was basically just dwarves that that this new modern Freemasonry was actually using. So in this sense, you can see that as like a version of technology, but it still breaks down to something organic. But it is very powerful if everybody else doesn't know that there's another realm that other things can walk through or kind of disappear. And they kind of blend in. That's why they call them hunters, because they have this thing where it's almost like they can blend right into nature, kind of like what Terrence McKenna would call a machine elf. And it's like their camouflage is so on point that you can't actually even see them, and they can do that in any place that they're in. So, you know, again, so we're just going through technology. So imagine that what would then come up at a certain point was how to like manage billions of beings with the technology. And more than that, just the potential of having all of the minds connected into a neural network or a data set where everything that is in the mind can then be seen. Why? Because there are things that are in our minds, because our minds are the deep, that we haven't seen in a long time, and they definitely haven't seen it. And whether we're afraid of that or not, I think that's another story. But basically, that our genetics contains such a vast memory base for a being that is loading memories and doesn't even have memories. They just trying to tap that memory base. So, but to do that, because that's why I said their equipment is very crude, they literally had to walk through the process of basically using scalar, as we mentioned earlier, but basically it's just like cymatics. That's the easiest way to explain it. Cymatics. This is what you would call crop circles, right? How to use cymatics to, like, as a language system to write and imprint different levels of things that need to happen. So imprinting like tattoos directly on the earth. So as I said before, this honestly has only been taking place strongly over the last 100, like since 1820, somewhere in there. So just to give you an idea of that, you know, whether these run over and over again and this always occurs, the particular spot that we chose to land in happens to be the time that the whole big decision about everything gets made anyway. And that's why I was saying I believe that I had something that was like sending off an alarm, like, yo, something is going on sector 29B, and it's going to mess all your stuff up. You need to get there now. I was going to write this story, right? It's got a little, you know, because we love stories, but it's just about a guy who basically is soaked into an illusion and is pleasuring. This is what I saw when I was going up through the chakras. As you're going through the chakras, when I first went through at a certain point, I reached the crown chakra and I saw myself lay on the throne, like slumped over, like high on opium or something, and a jester was dancing in front of me. I kid you not. And some weird beings. They was like the dog kind of beings you see in the Hindu writings, right? The Hindu texts, like they got there's these weird kind of chimera-like creatures, and this creature was dancing and doing all this stuff. And I remember being there, and I even had my queen with me, and we was kind of like slumped over like that. See, so what is that showing? Because man, when you do the math, at some point, it's like when you relax your guard, be the moment, be the moment it popped off. You got your underwear on, and you know you needed your armor. You know what I mean? Because of what was going on in the space, right? So it's just saying but if you perish in that, right? You know, you sink into another consciousness. That's like a sinking feeling, right? But you sink into another consciousness, and in this world, there'll be a little bit more binding. You know what I mean? You know, they be lying about that. You just become whatever you can become in the world because you put your energy and your essence in it. Like, man, like I put everything in over 13. This is 14 years. And still, like, I saw things, but I learned so much, and I never let them steal my light. You see what I mean? And so now this is like this me being here with you is symbolic to something way, way bigger than we can imagine, because we didn't come in here on guard. And I don't believe that. And this is what I really believe. We chose to give love and share the respect that, man, the more of us, man, that's why we deliver this message. And that's why I say on your panel, man, I was hearing cats come from different perspectives, different cities in town. They say your city or your town or whatever. But they knowledge, because what they had been through, then upgraded with what you were delivering. It was like, man, this is the real. If you're talking about some kind of technology, it still just breaks down to how we gonna use it. Like, meaning, how can we generate the things that are it's a cultivator, right? Because still the ones that have these things, they need certain supports so that they can do their thing, right? They need that when they come together, they come close and they feel like somebody really embraces them, cares about them. That is why Men was in front of Mentor. Like, there's a Taurus and a man. He's the Minotaur, right? And now they got him in the middle of the maze and he'd be lost. It's like, I don't know if I'm good. I don't know if I'm evil. Am I black? Am I white? Because that's the whole, the black versus black, the negar versus and it's just like, wait a minute. Whoa. You're everything. And what's happening is they keep splicing you right at that point where you're basically not accepting that the bad stuff too, because you gotta see what the results of all those things so that you can calibrate. And now somebody's already done the calibration for you. You arrive in 2022. It's not like a movie from the future. You are conscious. And now everything that they were waiting to see if we could prove already happened. So we can now look and say, well, did that work? Did worshiping Jesus work? Did that work? Did that work? We're in a very fortunate position. Be like, yo, it didn't work. They've been leaving that for 300 years. And so that ain't going to work. So, but what did work? And, then you start going sifting through the matrix, right? Like, that's why we got these big ass folders of pictures. Man, I got one called Need to Be Filed. Like, it can't, like, even the standard cat can't even look in that. The whole folder has to have a disclaimer, but it is that much powerful imagery and stuff from old times still out here delivering, hey, this is what you're really in. And that's why sometimes I can't exactly accept all the time the lack of mineralization in the matrix actually being that the matrix is fake versus that the program is not mineralized. Because like, if we were like, let's take, for instance, Texas, right? Texas is huge. So it's, imagine if we irrigated all of that and then made it into a lush rainforest versus what it is now, right? So I feel like that there's this, well, what are you really about as an energy though? Because if you're like decrepit as an energy, I would like assume that there would be like a category for decrepit energies after a while, and they would just be there together. And that's kind of like sometimes when I see Earth, is because when I get into those frequencies, like when I get mad or upset and I allow myself to be drawn into that, I'm almost able to experience in real time the forces that come with that. Now, some people are basically so desensitized to even feeling when those forces enter their space because they've been normalized inside of that space. And that's why sometimes, you got to pull the ripcord and be like, shock the body, move in mysterious ways, come out of the frequency that you're in completely and don't even warn yourself. It's almost like when I jump out this plane, I don't keep thinking about, oh my goodness, I'm going to jump out the plane. Or when I don't get to the door and start answering myself questions, the whole process, I just jump. And, and again, I'm not here to talk about just what I'm doing. I'm just here to explain that when I apply these things that I'm talking about, this is what it creates. So I'm describing a way of life, and it's up to you, obviously, to choose what kind of adjustments and decisions that you're going to make. In conclusion of the technology thing, so when they made the decision, the oligarchs went forward first. Right. So they built up basically their raggedy, clanky ass machine, which runs on oil, and they built a war machine. Mars and Marduk as a war god. That's why I'd be like, man, you want to go to war with these cats, you got to be kidding, because that's war machine for real. Right. So in that kind of warfare. So what happens is that our nation, of course, chose to do that, and they dropped those bombs on the Nagas. So the vendetta, is so they're so. Is the word? It's not called insolent. That's when you're really. They're incensed. this beef between cherubim and seraphim is so deep, it's in the blood. It's like when you kill somebody and they forever want to re-avenge who you killed, or you enslave somebody and they want to pay you back for enslaving them. That's the kind of energy that you're dealing with. So the moment that they got the knowledge that they needed from Aiwass, they immediately started working on the project to open up the gate to develop the bomb. And then the moment that they got it developed, that he dropped it right on the Nagas. And everybody knows the ancient Asiatics and the island of the Japan and all the dragon and all that kind of stuff and what all that really means in occultism. So I won't, go through that here this evening, but it's just why you're seeing dragon symbolism all over the place. Why Korea, when they mark it in the CIA, they call it one of the last living dragons, and just the family and the bloodline of the dragons, which again is, is this the beast, the dragon? The dragon. Yeah, the beast, the dragon. The dragon is the marshal, right? So it's like samurai for real, son of Sam. And it's a trained killer. The body is the weapon. And the discipline of that in that respect, but will remove a life. And the lack of, and the disconnection from anything that you would think would be like caring, because it fogs a warrior. Like when the warrior goes to battle and he's thinking about the wife and the kids, he's the first one to die. So the real warriors are trained. There's no caring in that respect of things, right? So in that case, you can say that the ego is then eliminated, but then what fills the body is indeed this flaming fire, like a dragon type of energy that is geared in its way for warfare. And that's what couples with that being.